What you're looking at here is a presentation that I gave back in 2007 at the DSI's Innovative Education Competition in 2007. And this is a course that I developed in 2006 as a blended course. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about how it has evolved into a pure distance learning course over the years. And the last time I gave it in 2013, it was entirely distance learning. So, overview of the presentation. We'll talk about some of the challenges and objectives I set forth in designing the course. I'll talk about the three different systems of delivery, how I delivered the content, how I monitored progress, and how I did testing. We'll also talk about some of the course outcomes, and I'll just briefly present the conclusions. There are a variety of challenges associated with teaching programming at USF because this was an interesting introductory programming course. First off, there's a large diversity of student backgrounds. Over half the students had never had a programming class, about half of them had had one programming class, and about half of those had had 3 or more programming classes. So we had a huge variety of background. We also had a diversity of interest. About 15% of the class indicated that they were interested in becoming programmers, and about 85% indicated they had no interest in becoming programmers. There was also a major change in the IS major during the period of around 2002-2003. After the internet bust at USF, we went from about 1,100 undergraduate majors to 175, and that meant we had to rethink a course that was originally designed as a gatekeeper course and make it one that actually retained our majors. So the objectives of the design were to try to reduce attrition of the course, try to promote some enthusiasm, and help motivate students for programming careers. So, how did we deliver content? Well, one of the most important tools that I used was to develop games as assignments. And so that if you take a look at every assignment was based around a game type of philosophy. They weren't very impressive games. One was kind of a fantasy game. Another was one that involved putting fish in aquarium. But one of the things we found is that students were very interested in game design. So showing them that they could create at least elementary games at an introductory level was something that we thought they would find very motivating. We made extensive use of Camtasia, and essentially the whole course was available on Camtasia. And what you're looking at here is an old Camtasia interface where there was a menu on the side and everything was deployed on the web. Camtasia has improved dramatically since that time, and the MP4 standard has made videos much, much better. The other thing you'll notice is the inking that I did. It made no sense at all to have faces on the lectures when I was using Camtasia for this purpose because the use of a face increased the file size by about a factor of 10 to 20 at that point. Nowadays, it has much, much less impact, so we're much more inclined to use the faces. But at any rate, we see the same Camtasia tablet tool that I still use today. Another tool we used was SoftChalk, and this was a tool designed to help us create web pages and embedded activities. Today, we can do the same thing far more easily using Canvas pages and Canvas quizzes, so the technology has advanced significantly beyond that. But the idea here was that with every video we created, we had an associated text. And if you look at the workbook for the faculty online workshop that I've given you, I'm using the same philosophy there, text and video, two different media to allow people to use the channel that they most like for content. Another thing that I did was developed assignments that were very, very easy to grade. Um, what we did is we create highly structured assignments where we would supply the students with probably 80% of the code, and their job was to modify it. This made sense for a number of reasons. For one thing, our students, when they entered the workforce, would not be writing code from scratch. Instead, they'd be more likely to maintain existing code. But in addition, having these assignments that were very, very controlled made it much, much easier for graders to look over the student code because there really weren't that many different ways to accomplish the tasks that we set forth for the assignments. We had a modular structure, essentially the same type of modular structure that we use here, the same sort of names, Module 0 through Module 4. This was a self-paced course design, and students accumulated points. Anyone who got as far as Module 4 ended up getting an A in the class if they managed to complete the projects. About the time you got a third of the way through Module 2, you had enough points in order to accumulate a C. And so we didn't expect students to complete everything, but this was a good way of handling the diversity of background because those students who were really motivated to program inevitably got through all the modules. Those students who were simply trying to meet the requirement tended to stop a lot earlier, but the students always knew that they were in control of their grades. Now, one of the big challenges of this course, because of its structure, was that it was entirely self-paced. After all, you get some students who are going halfway through the course and other students who are going all the way through the course. And so we had to develop a system of progress monitoring to alert the students to when they were on track and when they were falling behind. Now, one of the ways we did this is with the Blackboard Gradebook. What I did was I created SCORM versions of all the online lectures in Camtasia. And what SCORM did was it allowed me to upload these, and so I could actually see every time a student completed one of the exercises. Now, I would not have to do that today because in Canvas, the prerequisite and the requirements tool would allow me to track students' progress with a lot less effort. But at least this way, I had an idea of where students were. In fact, the grade book looked like a bar chart. Understand, there were 130 items in the grade book because all of these quizzes were very short. Another thing that I did is I actually wrote some software that every week would allow me to send out emails to every student. And each week, students were required to fill out a form in which they just sort of identified their own progress and any obstacles they were falling. What my software did was it actually created an email that took all the students' comments, packaged it back to them, took a photo of the student. Well, the software didn't take a photo, but I took a photo the first day of class and put it on a web server so that they could see the picture, and more importantly, so I could see the picture going through the reports. And it asked students if they wanted me to contact them. And if they checked yes, the report would appear yellow here, and I would immediately click on the email address and just send an email to the students indicating how are you doing. There weren't a great many people who did it. There were always one or two people in every class who wanted me to contact them every week, and I just sent an email, okay, how's it going? And that was usually the end of it. But for those people who did want to be contacted, it created a strong sense of interaction. Because one of the things that happened when I put all this content online is that a lot of students simply stopped coming to class and instead did all the activities out of class. In fact, by the time I was doing the course in 2012, I just told students, take it online or take it face-to-face, however you prefer, because I didn't do any lectures in class. There wasn't any need to. They were all captured in Camtasia. Now, since I was using the same assignments every time, you can obviously be very concerned about whether there was any cheating or copying going on, and absolutely, lots of people were copying each other's code. And what I indicated to them was that was okay as long as they understood it. What I did, however, is I developed a large test bank on each assignment. And so when someone turned in an assignment, what would happen is they would take a test that would pull random block questions out of the test bank. So typically I had 10 times as many questions as there were questions that would appear on each quiz. And then the students had to answer it in a relatively short period of time. And because of the fact that the questions tended to look a lot alike, uh, when you get to the Respondus video, if you watch it later on in the faculty workshop, you'll see why it is that the questions looked a lot alike. It was virtually impossible for them to just memorize the test. They really had to understand the questions. Now, these tests had to be proctored. And initially, what happened is we held the class in the lab. As time evolved, however, we started to use Elluminate as a tool for proctoring the exam because the exam was open book. And what would happen is the students would turn on a webcam and I would periodically monitor them while they were taking the test. Typically, I gave the students 2 opportunities to pass the test. If they couldn't pass it after 2 times, then they had to come to me for an oral exam. But the nice thing is that this was not what you would call a high stakes test because A, they could take it again, and B, the test grade didn't actually impact their score directly. Rather, it operated like an on-off switch. So until they passed the test, they got no credit for submitting the assignment. And so you would have some people who would actually do the assignment entirely by themselves. They virtually never had any trouble passing the test. And then you'd have people who'd copy the assignment, and for them, studying for the test became a major issue. In both cases, however, by the end, they knew enough so that we were reasonably comfortable with their progress. Now, how did students get support? Well, because I had all my lectures online, what I would do is encourage students to come into the classrooms for various types of sessions, and I would throw out questions to the students. And because I had just gotten a grant of HP tablet PCs, what I did was I actually had the students, I would throw out a problem and then I'd have them write their code. They'd submit the code to me, and then I would display it up on the whiteboard and talk about it. Well, I could do that in a classroom where everyone has a tablet, but now it would be entirely unnecessary to do that because I can do exactly the same type of thing in an Elluminate session. And so now Blackboard Collaborate allows me to do the types of things that I used to have to do using specialized hardware and software. I also very much encourage students to work with their peers. And I was very, very clear about this in the syllabus. This is actually a section from the syllabus. And the reason I think this is important is in the professional programming world, there's a lot of collaboration. But when you go into a lot of courses in hardcore computer science, they specifically tell you that you cannot work with other people and that talking with other people is cheating. And that's just not a very good lesson for people who are going out into the commercial programming world. So how about the outcomes of the course? Well, one of the things that I've been doing for years, really since 2002, was conducting an extensive survey of my students, as well as the traditional course evaluations. And what we saw is that early versions of the course, before it went game, before it went pure self-paced, when we didn't have the same type of lectures and integrated assignments, the performance of this course was not terribly strong. What happened over time, however, is that the course became much more popular. Retention, this key number, dropped, or losses dropped significantly down to 1%. And in fact, in fall 2007, we got the best evaluations and the best retention in the history of the course. The average grades of the students did not actually change that much. There was very little correlation between the grades we handed out and the ratings of the course. The students were simply a lot happier with the new activities. And broadly speaking, this 3.78 on a helpful scale like this is a very strong score. Students actually really liked the self-paced nature of this newly designed course. Now, there were certain strengths and weaknesses to the course. Among the weaknesses is there's a lot of setup. Just as there has been with the faculty workshop, this type of course does not come for free, and if you're going to make it self-paced, you can't really do it on the fly. You can't really coordinate activities between students because they're operating in different paces, and the instructor is kind of out of control in many respects. On the other hand, it's got a lot of strengths. Once you've got the course going, it did not put a lot of demands on me. It handles a big range of backgrounds coming in. And when we talk about the diversity of students as one of the dimensions to help you decide content, this course had huge diversity because there was such a wide variation in background. On the other hand, I really wanted the students to learn very specific things, and that's why having the same assignments and having everyone do the same assignment wasn't really that big a problem, because at this stage, learning the mechanics of programming, there really is a right answer. So this particular course falls in the highly complex students, but the relatively straightforward software, or rather relatively straightforward class outcomes. And so, you know, in the long run, it was definitely worth it as far as we perceived. We really improved the retention. We found that the course performance was almost independent of background. It transitioned very, very easily to distance learning. In fact, I really didn't have to change anything for distance learning. About the only thing that I did was I moved all of the videos into an Acrobat file in 2010 so that it was readily accessible to students. And of course, you've seen that in the faculty workshop as well. And as long as you, the instructor, are not absolutely insistent on feeling in complete control of the process, because you don't feel in control of this particular process, it's a pretty good design when you have a very clear endpoint, as we did for this course. So that's basically the summary of my presentation, and one of the things that will probably indicate to you is how even a 20-minute presentation can seem excruciatingly long.